Welcome, everybody, to the headline here on Cheddar. I'm Dave Briggs on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange after a big decision from the Fed this week. We found out, yes, size does matter when it comes to interest rate cuts, and the Fed went big. Jerome Powell announcing a half-point cut, the first in 4 years, adding he's not declaring mission accomplished on inflation, and the economy is strong. So what's the impact and the politics of all this? Nathan Sheets is the global chief economist at Citigroup. He joins us now. Good to see you, sir. Let's rewind to your initial reaction when you heard the size of the cut. Markets were split. What did you think? Was it the right decision?
I think this one was clearly a close call, but what is true, and I think this is what tipped the balance to 50, is that for the Fed, the alignment of risks around their dual mandate of full employment on the one hand and price stability and low inflation on the other had shifted significantly. 6 months ago, 12 months ago, it was all about inflation. Inflation, it's not defeated, but it's looking a lot better, and the economy's looking softer. And the Fed concluded it just doesn't need to be as tight as they have been for the past year, and they went with the discrete 50 basis point cut.
Here's what you were hearing around the exchange, that most expected 25, and the theory was if it was 50, the markets would panic. People here would panic because the Fed must know something they don't. Instead, I am seeing a ton of green on the board, led by the NASDAQ up more than 2.5%. You're looking at Airbnb, Tesla, Apple. Why?
Markets like lower rates. And I think that's the first order answer. The additional point is I think Powell was very careful in saying we're doing 50 basis points, not so much because we're worried about the economy and that we know something about weakness there that's not broadly known, but because of the progress that we've made on inflation. And again, he didn't declare victory on it, but gee, it does look a lot better than it did a while ago. And that is the key. And so the markets like this narrative. It's a soft landing narrative. And equities are up as a result of that. And the markets are happy. And hopefully Powell's right. And we do get the soft landing.
Will big tech continue to lead the rally, and why?
It's a really tough question. That on the one hand, when I think about AI, when I think about U.S. tech, I am a believer. I think we're going to see AI transform the U.S. economy in the years ahead. On the other hand, boy, some of those stocks are very aggressively priced. And if you press me, I would kind of lean toward and think about what are some of the sectors that are likely to be second-round beneficiaries of this technology. For example, like manufacturing or pharmaceuticals or further development of e-commerce. So I think it's going to be about the implications of technology going forward. There's a lot of earnings have been priced into those tech stocks already.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at NVIDIA up about 150, 160% this year, and it's up about 5% today. It is truly astounding to see that stock continue to rally despite the multiples. Okay, so what do you expect the Fed to do come November? That's just a few days after the election.
Well, Powell was very careful to not pre-commit to what was going to happen at the next meetings, and stipulated that we shouldn't think of 50 basis points as the new normal in terms of the pace of rate cuts. However, this same narrative that led them to do 50 yesterday, that the alignment of risks around their objectives has shifted toward worries about the labor market and the economy, I think is likely to be in play in November. So if you press me for a call, what's it going to be? I think we're very likely to see another 50 basis points in November and still further cuts in December. I would expect by the end of the year we'll be looking at a Fed funds rate right around 4%. So down, 125 basis points or so from its peak.
Largest cut in 16 years, and we could be looking at another. So the decision came 48 days from the election. President Trump telling reporters, quote, to cut by that much, the economy would be very bad or they're playing politics. I'll rule out the latter. True or false, the economy would be very bad to require a 50-point cut.
As I look at it, I don't think it's that the economy is collapsing or that it's a sign of deep kind of economic weakness. I think rather it's a reflection that policy has been very tight over the last year or so. And now the Fed's saying it doesn't need to be as tight, it doesn't need to be as restrictive as it has been. So I think it's more a reflection of where policy has been in light of a slowing economy and a loosening labor market. But, GDP growth for the quarter is tracking somewhere between 2 and 3%, as Powell said yesterday. That's not bad. That's pretty good.
It is pretty good. So I want to circle back to the two narratives you started with, soft landing and inflation. Is a soft landing, in your estimation, baked in? Are you ruling out a recession?
Can't rule out a recession. I'm hopeful we'll get the soft landing, but as an economist, I always have to give you probabilities. And kind of in my head, I'd kind of go 2/3 on the soft landing, 1/3 on the recession, but it's still possible. The labor market is loosening. When the labor market loosens, we've had recessions. I should also note that many economists are debating this. Even within city economics, our U.S. team is more worried about the downturn than I am and would probably handicap it differently.
And the question on the minds of Americans, inflation, will it get back to 2%? When? And for those that say, well, I don't feel prices going down, I don't see them going down, you tell them what?
The key point here is that I do think inflation is going to continue to come down, and it will get back maybe over the next year or so to the Fed's 2% target. But inflation going back to 2% is only telling those folks that are worried about the level of prices that their prices aren't going to be going up at a faster, more rapid rate. It doesn't mean that the price of oranges or bread or milk at the grocery store is going down. As an economist, when I go to the grocery store, it's sticker shock. But I don't have a lot of hope that we're going to see lower prices anytime soon, only that they're not going to be going up as rapidly as they have in recent years.
A glimmer of good news. The other aspect of the economy that Americans do tend to see and feel, of course, is the housing market. When do you expect rates to significantly come down to what level? And will it kind of unfreeze the housing market across the country?
Well, as you say, we have a very weak housing market at the moment. And indeed, the only thing that's strong in the housing market is house prices, which means there aren't a lot of houses being sold. And part of that is that people can't afford them. But another part of it is that mortgage rates have been high. And we have seen some retreat in mortgage rates. They're now in the low 6% range. Recently, I think that it will require a further drop to really unlock the labor market, or rather the housing market, maybe a rate around 5%. So I think we're moving in the right direction, but I don't think that this is going to fix a very challenged housing market for us by any stretch.
May not fix it until 2026. And final question, should we applaud the Fed for pulling this off? Or should we remind folks that they may have helped start this fire by being late to the party?
Let's see how this thing plays through. And if Powell's able to achieve a soft landing, we've got to give him a lot of credit. That we don't have a lot of economic history and experience with soft landing. So if he gets you, we've got to pat him on the back for it. On the other hand, if we have the recession, this is going to feel a lot like other cycles, and it's going to lead to analysis as to what the Fed did wrong and what it could have done differently. So in my view, jury's still out. Let's talk again in 6 to 12 months, and I'll give you a firmer answer to the question.
I will see you in 6 to 12 months. Our thanks to Nathan Sheets from Citigroup. Much appreciate the time, sir. Coming up, more on how this week's Fed decision will impact the presidential race. Stay with us here on Cheddar. Welcome back to The Headline, everyone. We just reached an important moment. Inflation and interest rates are falling while the economy remains strong. That's how President Biden reacted to the larger than expected half-point interest rate cut this week. Is that the case? Megan Lenhart, senior economics writer at Barron's, gets to be our judge and jury this morning. Nice to see you. So former President Trump says the cut, quote, shows the economy is very bad. Two very different narratives. What do the numbers show, Megan?
I think the numbers actually show that the economy is solid. And you heard this from Chair Jerome Powell yesterday. I think he used solid several times to describe the economy as well as the labor market. We've certainly seen some cooling in the labor market over the last couple of months, but it is worth noting that overall economic conditions are not crumbling. We're not staring a recession in the face, if you will.
If the economy is strong, why do we need the largest interest rate cut in 16 years?
It's interesting that we're classifying this as such a large interest rate, especially given where we are. I think we have to put this into context. We were at the most restrictive rate we've seen in 2 decades as well. So it does make sense to kind of front load some of this normalization that we're expecting to see from the Fed. We certainly saw in the dot plots that we're going to get more rate cuts this year. We're going to get more rate cuts next year. And this is all going back to getting down to a more neutral rate, something that's sustainable over the long term. Now, of course, this does kind of build in that soft landing scenario that we've heard a lot from Fed officials over the last year. This is certainly still on track at this point, but time will tell if we're actually going to get to that soft landing. Right now, we're kind of in the no landing phase.
Time will tell, and there's not much time left before the election, just 47 days. Will voters see or feel the impact of rates coming down?
I think the first initial rate cut is a little psychological for a lot of us. We've been seeing such high borrowing costs for such a long time. You know, this has been about 14 months since we had the last rate hike. And then, of course, things remain pretty steady. This is kind of an interesting point for us. It's not quite as much of a pivot, I think, as what Powell classified as a recalibration. But unfortunately, those long and variable lags that we talked about so much on the hiking cycle also matter on the cutting end of the cycle as well. It's going to take some time for the economy to absorb any of these rate cuts. And quite frankly, even though we started to see mortgage rates move and things like that, a lot of the aspects around borrowing costs and things like that, they've actually already been priced in some respects. So you won't see too much movement based on the 0.5 percentage point cut that we saw yesterday, but it will sit there and start to ease out as we get those consistent cuts that we're supposedly expecting given the dot plot that we saw yesterday.
Could get another 50-point cut just a few days after the election. But between now and then, what, if anything, could change perceptions of the economy today?
I think the tuning fork, if you will, right now for the Fed officials is going to be labor conditions. This was really very much stressed in the comments and remarks we got from Jerome Powell yesterday. It's also something that we've seen several Fed officials really nail down over the last couple of months. This is something that they're saying, look, the labor market is solid, but we don't want to see it deteriorate any further. We've certainly seen cooling over the last couple of months. We've seen payrolls, significantly fall back. We've seen the unemployment rate rise. We've seen vacancies to unemployed workers, for example, also kind of come back to more normal levels. This is all in line with what we were expecting to see coming out of this recovery period from the pandemic. But it is something where we're starting to sit there and say, okay, if we're looking at trying to normalize to those pre-recession levels, we're there, if not maybe perhaps a little bit beyond that. So we don't want to sit there and see a ton of weakening. At this point, what we are seeing in the labor market is employers pulling back from hiring, but we're not seeing mass layoffs. And that's the point, and I think the tipping point that we want to avoid in this situation if we do want that soft landing.
So in all likelihood, nothing will dramatically change between now and the election, though you see the markets today just taking off on this Fed decision. That certainly doesn't help the current narrative. So the Fed being late to the party poured gas on the inflationary mess, but federal spending out of control was probably really the match. Based on their economic policies, did Kamala Harris or Donald Trump learn anything?
You know, it's interesting. We don't have that many details from either candidate at this point on their economic plans, and particularly around their spending. Both have sort of, indicated that they're interested in trying to rein in that deficit, but no real concrete details on how. In fact, some of those plans already are increasing that debt even out of the gate. I think, both parties have been equally culpable in recent presidencies around their spending. And so it is going to be interesting to see, no matter who's in office, what they do to really address this, because this is coming to a point where we are starting to see a decent amount of concern from economists, from policy analysts, and of course from those within, the Senate and House. So it's something that, we again don't have a lot of details at the moment, but it is kind of interesting to see that this is becoming a key talking point in this particular election. I think overall, the pocketbook issues, the economic issues are really what seem to be driving a lot of the narrative and the questions that both candidates are facing.
Yeah, concerns for the debt and deficit have disappeared from both parties in recent years. Forget about that. And to your point, the American people are the ones suffering from not having another debate. And the Harris-Walz team, 7 combined press conferences and interviews compared to the 73 for Trump and Vance is really astounding. What do we know? Let's talk both camps. Let's start with Trump and Vance. What do we know about their core economic policy?
I think what the policy that we've really heard the most about right now is the plan for tariffs. And this is kind of the details are going back and forth on what exactly we're going to see, but certainly an increase, a substantial increase to the likes we really haven't seen in recent years. And so that could be interesting. Now, of course, the Democrats have sort of categorized this as a little bit of a middle class, tax. And it is one of those situations where we have seen that tariffs do tend to get passed along to the American consumer. Now, we haven't actually done research, or enough research perhaps, to the extent and the level that Trump and Vance are discussing here, but it would be an interesting, acceleration in this regard for, the tariff aspect of this. Now, on the Democrat side, we're seeing a lot of pocketbook issues that, the Harris and her candidate are concentrating on at the moment. Mm-hmm. And so these are things like, getting that child tax credit back that we saw during the pandemic, increasing it for, those with newborns. We're seeing, some kind of, housing help to, sort of help folks with their down payment. A lot of these things are things that I think, a lot of Americans can find, broadly appealing. How you're going to pay for that, of course, remains to be seen. Additionally, a lot of this is going to have to get through Congress. And again, if we have a divided Congress, that could be very difficult to get any of these things passed. I mean, you may see a little bit of a gridlock in the coming months.
Which may, in fact, be the good thing, because it looks like the thing they have in common is a massive expansion of debt and deficit. Early in this campaign, President Trump had a massive lead on the economy. It began to shrink. And then came this outlier poll from the Financial Times and the University of Michigan, which showed Harris, after the debate, stronger on the economy. What are you seeing overall? If this issue is central on voters' minds, who wins?
It's interesting. I think we're really going to have to look at the economies within the swing states. This is something that my colleagues and I have been looking at now for a couple of months, and we're still doing a decent amount of research on. But it feels like not everyone is seeing the same economic conditions. And this is something that we've talked about throughout the post-pandemic recovery. Those in urban environments versus rural, those within the coast versus the middle of the country. We've seen a lot of different shifts happening. And so we really need to start looking at, okay, within these swing states, what's going on with wage growth? What's going on with employment? What are we starting to see when it comes to, the labor conditions there? And of course, household wealth. I think it really is going to come down to how voters in these key battleground states really feel. And that can be different than how I feel in New York, or those feel in LA, or certainly even Texas or Florida.
Any financial impact by the Teamsters Union failing to endorse either candidate, first time in 30 plus years?
It's interesting because we did see the UAW, excuse me, support the Democrats and come out for them. I do think that it's going to come down to different sectors are going to feel a different aspect. You certainly started to see job gains concentrated in the last couple of months. And so I do wonder if it's going to be a bit of a sector by sector. I also think that the endorsements, especially in the current campaign, may not carry as much weight with their members or even outside voters.
I think we can agree on that. It's going to be tight, neck and neck in those 7 swing states. Our thanks to Barron's own Megan Lenhart for that conversation. Coming up, the business headlines you may have missed this week, including which major company is requiring employees to return to the office 5 days a week. That's next. Welcome back. With the Fed decision taking up much of the news this week, let's catch up on some of the business headlines you may have missed. Home Depot agreeing to hammer out a nearly $2 million settlement in a California lawsuit accusing it of overcharging customers at checkout. Prosecutors from 6 counties claimed scanner violations led to deceptive pricing. While Home Depot admitted no wrongdoing, it will implement reforms, including honoring the lowest posted prices and hiring a price accuracy watchdog. The settlement includes $1.7 million for consumer law enforcement and protection initiatives in California. A new player in the world of crypto. Former President Donald Trump launching a new cryptocurrency business called World Liberty Financial, though its exact purpose remains unclear. Trump, his 2 eldest sons, and 2 unknown crypto entrepreneurs unveiled the venture this week, raising concerns about potential conflicts of interest. Despite Trump's past skepticism of crypto, he now supports it, claiming it will transform the financial system. The platform is expected to feature a cryptocurrency of its own and aims to promote the adoption of stablecoins. No official launch date has been set. Amazon telling corporate employees to clock back in for a full return to office, requiring 5 days a week starting in January. CEO Andy Jassy saying in-person collaboration is vital for maintaining Amazon's speed and culture as the company grew rapidly during the pandemic. The change affects over 350,000 corporate workers, and of course, many expressing frustration over this RTO policy. Apple's iOS 18 is making waves with its Fruitful update released on September 18th. It features over 33 security fixes and new additions like improved privacy settings and a better password manager. The update addresses serious vulnerabilities in WebKit, the iPhone kernel, and core Bluetooth. Users can choose iOS 17.7 for fewer updates and potential bugs. Meta launching Instagram teen accounts to filter the feed for younger users, aiming to address concerns about social media's impact on mental health. Teen profiles will be private by default, with parental controls over messaging, notifications, and interactions. Parents can monitor their children's contacts and restrict app usage times. The new features, which Meta hopes will provide safer online experiences for teens, will roll out over the next 60 days. That's going to do it for the headline this week. Stay tuned for more Cheddar up next.